Inheritance. In this lesson, we'll look at the science and engineering practices of developing and using models, using mathematics and computational thinking, constructing explanations and designing solutions, as well as obtaining, evaluating, and communicating information. Our cross-cutting concepts include patterns, cause and effect, scale, proportion, and quantity, as well as structure and function. So what is inheritance? Inheritance is the process by which parents pass on traits or characteristics to their offspring. If a trait can be passed on to the next generation, then it is said to be heritable. Parents pass on genes to their offspring during reproduction. As a result, heritable traits are genetic. An individual's characteristics are therefore influenced by the genes they inherit from their parents. Genotype and phenotype. The full set of genes of an organism is called its genotype. Phenotype describes the overall observable characteristics of an organism. This depends on 1. The organism's genotype, its inherited characteristics. 2. The environment in which the organism lives. This means that an organism's phenotype depends on its genotype plus its interaction with the environment. So phenotype equals genotype plus environmental effects. Understanding the genome. The entire genetic material of an organism forms its genome. An individual's DNA is located in the nucleus of its cells. In the nucleus, DNA is arranged into chromosomes. Each chromosome is made of a single strand of DNA. A gene is a section of DNA that codes for a specific protein, which contributes to a particular trait. There can be more than one version of a particular gene. Alternative forms of the same gene are called alleles. So let's fill out the missing words. In body cells, chromosomes are usually found in pairs. Human body cells contain 23 pairs of chromosomes for a total of 46. Chromosomes are located in the nucleus of cells. Chromosomes contain genes, which are sections of DNA. These code for our proteins, which perform a variety of functions within the body. Genes contribute to an organism's set of observable characteristics. This is called the phenotype. Chromosomes and alleles. In body cells, those cells that make up our body, chromosomes are found in pairs which contain genes coding for the same characteristics, such as eye color. However, each chromosome in the pair may have a different allele or variant of the gene. Chromosomes are said to form homologous pairs, as they contain different alleles for the same genes. For example, an allele on one chromosome from one parent may code for brown eyes, whereas the allele on the other chromosome from your other parent may code for blue eyes. We have homologous chromosomes that have different alleles for the same characteristic. One of those alleles codes for you to have blue eye color, and the other allele codes for you to have brown eye color. What eye color do you think this individual may have? Homozygous alleles. If the alleles for a characteristic in a homologous pair are the same, the individual is said to be homozygous for that characteristic. What color eyes will an individual have with these homozygous pairs of alleles? An allele for brown eyes and an allele for brown eyes. You guessed it, the individual will have brown eyes. In each homologous pair of chromosomes, one chromosome has been inherited from the mother and the other from the father. Similarly, in a pair of alleles for a particular gene, one has been inherited from the mother and the other from the father. Heterozygous alleles. If the alleles for a characteristic in a homologous pair are different, the organism is said to be heterozygous for that characteristic. What color eyes will an individual have with this pair of heterozygous alleles? One allele for brown eyes and one allele for blue eyes. Expression is the term used to describe an active gene that is used for the production of a functional protein. Not all genes in the genome are expressed. Only genes that are expressed produce protein. If a gene is not expressed, it doesn't produce any protein, which means that it cannot contribute to the trait or the organism's phenotype. In this particular example, the brown eye allele is expressed, whereas the blue eye allele is masked, giving the offspring brown eyes. Dominant or recessive. The phenotype produced by a pair of heterozygous alleles depends on which allele is dominant and which is recessive. Dominant alleles are always expressed. Only one copy of the dominant allele is needed for it to be expressed. Dominant alleles, for example, our brown eye from the last slide, are represented by an uppercase letter. For example, an uppercase B for this particular allele. Recessive alleles are only expressed if there are two copies present and no dominant allele. If a dominant allele is present, the recessive allele cannot contribute to the phenotype. Recessive alleles, for example blue eyes, are represented by a lowercase letter. Example lowercase b. So what eye color? If a person is heterozygous for eye color, carrying an allele for blue eyes and an allele for brown eyes, then their genotype for this characteristic can be written as big B, little b. The dominant allele, brown, has a capital letter and is written before the recessive allele, blue, which is in lowercase. Using this knowledge, we know that the eye color of this example ends up being brown. All right, we're going to match some inheritable terms to their definitions. An allele is a particular version of a gene. Homozygous means having two identical alleles of the same gene. Heterozygous, having two different alleles of the same gene. Dominant, an allele that is always expressed even if there is only one copy present. And recessive, an allele that is only expressed if there is no dominant allele present. Passing on genes. During sexual reproduction, the male and female gametes, the sperm cells and the egg cells, fuse. This causes the genetic material they each carry to combine. The sperm cell contains genes from the father, and the egg cell contains genes from the mother. When a male and female gamete fuse together during fertilization, the new combination of genes produced determines the offspring's genotype. However, an individual does not inherit all of the genes of both parents. Instead, they only inherit half of each parent's genes. So what would happen if you inherited all of the genes from both of your parents? If the male and female gametes contained all of the genes from both parents, the offspring would have double the normal number of chromosomes and genes. Gametes. Gametes contain half the normal number of chromosomes found in body cells. This is because during meiosis, only half of the parent's chromosomes enter each gamete produced. This means gametes only contain one allele for each gene. When a male and a female gamete fuse during fertilization, the full number of chromosomes is restored. If this did not happen, the zygote, produced by fertilization, would have double the normal number of chromosomes. A normal human body cell contains 46 chromosomes in 23 pairs. Human gametes, the sperm cells and the egg cells, contain 23 chromosomes. Looking at the image to the right, this is a colored scanning electron micrograph of sperm, which is blue in color, attempting to penetrate the human egg, which is red. Each sperm, or spermatozoa, has a rounded head and a long tail with which it swims. Women usually release one egg or ovum each month, whereas men release millions of sperm in each ejaculation. Only one of these sperm can penetrate the egg's thick outer layer and fertilize it. Fertilization occurs when the sperm's genetic material, the DNA, fuses with the egg's DNA. When this occurs, the egg forms a barrier to other sperm. Which alleles are inherited? A mother and a father both have 2 alleles of every gene. Only one of these alleles enters any single gamete. When a sperm and an egg cell fuse, the offspring inherits only one allele for every gene from each parent. A Punnett square diagram can be used to determine the probability of offspring inheriting a particular combination of alleles. In a Punnett square diagram, we put the mother's alleles across the top and the father's alleles across the side. Mom contains one lowercase s allele from either her mother or father, and one lowercase s allele, again from either her mother or father. The father's alleles in this case include 2 uppercase s's, the first from either his mother or father, and the second from either his mother or father. The combination of these alleles could result in these possible genotypes of offspring. The lowercase s from mom comes down to fill this box and this box, and the same thing for this contrasting allele. The uppercase S would be passed into each of these boxes, causing 100% of this cross offspring to be uppercase S, lowercase s. This allows us to predict the possible genotypes and phenotypes of an offspring. Genetic crosses and Punnett squares. A genetic cross is when two organisms are bred together to produce offspring. The genotype of the parents and phenotype of the offspring are investigated to determine the pattern by which the parental alleles are inherited. Punnett squares are used during genetic crosses. They show the alleles of each parent and their gametes for a particular gene. This is used to show each possible combination of alleles that can be produced when the mother and father's gametes fuse. Expressing outcomes. Punnett squares are used to predict the outcome of a genetic cross. Outcomes can be expressed in several ways. How could you express the number of brown and white chickens shown here? As a ratio, the chickens are white or brown in a ratio of 3 white chickens to 1 brown chicken. As a percentage, in this case, 75% of the chickens are white and 25% are brown. Or as a probability. The probability of a chicken being white is 0.75 or 3 out of 4. So let's review this. A ratio. There are 6 white chickens and 2 brown chickens. Therefore, the relationship between white and brown chickens is 6 to 2. This can be simplified as 2 is the common factor for both of these numbers. As a result, the ratio of the white to brown chickens is 3 to 1. This means that for every 3 white chickens, there is 1 brown chicken. Percentage. There are 8 chickens in total. The percentage of white chickens is calculated by dividing the number of white chickens by the total number of chickens and then multiplying by 100. So 6 divided by 8 times 100 equals 75. 75% of the total number of chickens are white. Likewise, the percentage of brown chickens is calculated by dividing the number of brown chickens by the total number of chickens and then multiplying by 100. So 2 divided by 8 times 100 equals 25. 25% of the total number of chickens are white. Probability. This can be written as a number between 0 and 1. The probability of something happening cannot be higher than 1. If something has a probability of 1, it means it will definitely happen. There are 8 chickens in total. If 1 is taken at random, the likelihood of selecting a white chicken is 6 in 8. This can be simplified to 3 in 4. 3 divided by 4 equals 0.75. So the probability of a chicken being white is 0.75. Single gene crosses. Some characteristics are controlled by a single gene. These characteristics can be investigated using a single gene cross, also known as a monohybrid cross. There are 2 alleles controlling P shape. This means there are 3 possible genotypes that the plants could inherit, leading to 2 possible phenotypes. So the homozygous dominant genotype is uppercase S, uppercase S, 2 uppercase S's. The phenotype, the physical trait that is expressed, is smooth. Homozygous recessive. This is when the P shape gets 2 recessive alleles, lowercase s and lowercase s. This phenotype is wrinkly. The physical characteristic expressed is that the P shape is wrinkly. Or you could be heterozygous, meaning that you're getting 1 of each allele, an uppercase S and a lowercase s. In this instance, the dominant allele is expressed, causing the phenotype to be smooth. The likelihood of each phenotype being produced during a cross can be mapped out using a Punnett square. So using that Punnett square, and let's specifically use the example of pea shape. Punnett squares show each of the possible outcomes of a monohybrid cross. So smooth times wrinkly. Stage 1. A homozygous smooth pea plant is crossed with a homozygous wrinkly pea plant. Our parent genotypes for the smooth pea are uppercase S, uppercase S. For the wrinkly pea, it is lowercase s and another lowercase s. Gametes are produced. In stage 2, the only possible combination of the gametes produced by this cross is uppercase S, lowercase s. So is the phenotype of the peas produced smooth or wrinkly? Stage 3. All of the peas produced are heterozygous and have a smooth phenotype. There is no other possibility. Stage 4. Next, a heterozygous smooth pea plant is crossed with another heterozygous smooth pea plant. Our parent phenotypes are that they are both smooth pea plants. The parent genotype is uppercase S, lowercase s. The other parent is also uppercase S, lowercase s. This tells us that they are heterozygous. Recall, homozygous would mean they either are both uppercase S, or lowercase s, lowercase s. So gametes are produced by this genetic variation. The three possible combinations of gametes produced by this cross are uppercase S, uppercase s, uppercase S, lowercase s, and lowercase s, lowercase s. So when fertilization takes place, the possibilities that we have are seen here. Uppercase S and uppercase s will give us a smooth pea. Again, the heterozygous variation will give us a smooth pea as well. So 3 of 4 will end up with the characteristics that the parents had. In stage 6, the allele for wrinkly peas is recessive. Only plants that inherit the lowercase s combination of alleles are wrinkly. The ratio of smooth to wrinkly peas resulting from this cross is 3:1. Eye color of the offspring of homozygous parents. The allele for brown eyes, big B, is dominant over the recessive allele for blue eyes, lowercase b. If a homozygous brown-eyed person and a homozygous blue-eyed person reproduce, what are the possible eye colors of their offspring? Stage 1, both parents are homozygous for their eye color. So what are their genotypes? Said they're homozygous, meaning they have the same. Stage 2, what genes are present in each parent's gametes? The brown-eyed individual only has the gametes for brown eyes. The blue-eyed individual only has the gametes for blue eyes. Stage 3, what are the possible genotypes of the offspring produced by this cross? This individual only has a lowercase b to give, whereas this individual only has an uppercase B to give. So when I look at the probability of this cross, 100% of the offspring, or 4 of 4 boxes, will end up with this particular combination of uppercase B, lowercase b. All of the offspring are heterozygous. Stage 4. What are the possible phenotypes of the offspring produced by this cross? Well, if you're big B, little b, you have the dominant allele of brown eyes. So every single one of the offspring are going to have the phenotype of brown eyes. All right, let's look at the next cross. The allele for brown eyes is dominant over the allele for blue eyes. If two heterozygous brown-eyed parents reproduce, what are the possible eye colors of the offspring? Both parents are heterozygous for their eye color. So what are their genotypes? We know they have brown eyes, but they're heterozygous, so they must be carriers of the blue-eye gene. So what gametes do they have for possibilities? This parent could give an uppercase B or a lowercase b. This parent could also give an uppercase B or a lowercase b. So let's do the cross using a Punnett square. This parent has an uppercase B or a lowercase b to give. The same for the other parent. So if this parent gives an uppercase B and this parent gives an uppercase B, we now have an offspring that has two homozygous dominant alleles, causing them to be brown-eyed. In this box, this parent might give the lowercase b, and this parent might give the uppercase b. This is a heterozygous individual. So this offspring would be heterozygous for brown eye color. The same thing over here. This parent gives an uppercase B. The other parent gives a lowercase b. Again, heterozygous. But what happens if they both give the lowercase b? In this instance, we've got the phenotype of brown eye color because we have the dominant allele. The same thing here. The dominant allele is brown eye color and it's present. Therefore, the offspring gets brown eyes. Same thing here. But over here, 25% of the time, the offspring may end up with blue eye color. 25% comes from one of the 4 boxes we produced in the Punnett square. Single gene cross questions. Analyzing monohybrid crosses. Can you analyze these monohybrid crosses to find the correct answers? A homozygous brown mouse is bred with a homozygous white mouse. The gene for brown fur is dominant. What will the offspring end up with as far as a phenotype? If we cross the two, 100% of them will end up with an uppercase B. So they will all be brown. Question number 2. A heterozygous smooth pea plant was crossed with a homozygous wrinkled pea plant. The gene for smooth peas is dominant. What will be the phenotypes of the offspring? So we've got a heterozygous crossed with a homozygous. With this cross, 50% will be wrinkled and 50% will be smooth. Question 3. 2 heterozygous brown mice were bred together. The gene for brown fur is dominant. What will be the phenotypes of the offspring? In this case, 3 of 4 of the crossing would end up with brown colored fur, whereas 1 would end up with white colored fur. Question 4. Look at the monohybrid cross below. What is the genotype of the pea plant labeled with the question mark? If every single one of the offspring are coming back as smooth, it must be an uppercase S genotype. Question 5. If 2 of the offspring of this cross were bred together, what would be the phenotypes of the offspring? With this cross, they would be smooth and wrinkled in the ratio of 3:1. Number 6. Look at this family pedigree of some white and brown mice. What is the genotype of the individual labeled with the question mark? That individual must be heterozygous with a dominant allele and a recessive allele. Family trees. A family tree, also known as a family pedigree, is a diagram which shows the inheritance of genes and traits from one generation to the next. Here is an example of a family tree showing the inheritance of eye color. Both parents are heterozygous for eye color. The allele for blue eyes is recessive, so only offspring that inherit a lowercase b allele from both parents have blue eyes. A Punnett square diagram can be used to show the likelihood of the 5th child inheriting the genotype lowercase b, lowercase b. It is 1 in 4. Interacting genes. Very few characteristics are controlled by a single gene. Examples include fur color in mice and pendulous or attached ears in humans. The majority of phenotypic features are a result of multiple genes interacting with one another. The pattern of inheritance for these traits is much more difficult to determine. This is because the likelihood of inheriting many different genes and their alleles is to be considered. Can you think of any heritable traits that involve the interaction of multiple genes? Examples of multi-gene traits include height, hair color, weight, and skin color. What are sex chromosomes? Human body cells contain 23 pairs of chromosomes. Of these chromosome pairs, 22 control characteristics only, but one pair carries genes that determine sex. The chromosomes in this pair are called the sex chromosomes. There are two types of sex chromosomes, X and Y. X and Y chromosomes. Both males and females have two sex chromosomes. Males have one X and one Y chromosome. They have the genotype XY. Females have two X chromosomes. They have the genotype XX. Y chromosomes are very small and contain just 78 genes. X chromosomes are larger and contain 900 to 1200 genes. Because females can only produce X gametes, it is the sperm that determines the sex of the offspring at fertilization. If you inherit a Y chromosome from dad, you will be male. But if you inherit an X chromosome from dad, you will be female. Sex determination. The combination of sex chromosomes a zygote inherits determines whether it will develop into a boy or a girl. In stage 1, males have one X and one Y chromosome, XY. Females have two X chromosomes, XX. So what are the types of gametes produced by males and females called? Stage 2. Male sperm cells can contain an X or a Y chromosome. Female egg cells can only contain an X chromosome. What combinations could result at fertilization? Stage 3. What sex will the XY zygotes develop into? And what sex will the XX zygotes develop into? Recall that if you end up with two X chromosomes, you are female. If you have an X and a Y chromosome, you are male. So males are equally likely to be produced as females in this cross. In stage 4, males are equally likely to produce sperm containing an X chromosome as a Y chromosome. This means there is an equal probability of the zygote being male or female.